Hello and welcome to the Clear Crypto Podcast, brought to you by Starkware and Cointelegraph. No jargon, no hype, just straight talk on what crypto and blockchain do today and what they'll do tomorrow. And today, a special Mother's Day episode. Clearing crypto. If those two words sound like a contradiction in terms, you're in the right place, whether you're getting started in this world and look to us to get you up to speed, or whether you're an OG, you live and breathe this stuff and want experience in how to explain it to the outside world. Where else do you get to sharpen your tools to communicate our amazing world to the outside with the flair and precision that we need if we're hoping to succeed? I'm Nathan, a journalist who's fallen into blockchain, and I want to bring Gareth into the conversation straight away. Gareth, how are you doing, managing editor of Cointelegraph?
How's it, Nathan? I'm good. Always good to join you. I really look forward to this podcast every week, and I think we've done some fantastic episodes in the past, but I'm really looking forward to this one because I think it's a special one and something that the industry should be doing a lot more of.
Right. And one thing that I've been thinking about is that when people want to explain something complicated, they'll often say, hey, could you explain this crypto concept like you would to your mum? It's never like you would explain it to your dad. It's kind of automatic. Now, it sounds harmless, and I don't think there's any kind of nastiness there, but it kind of wraps a quiet sexism, a quiet ageism into one lazy phrase. So what I thought we'd do today, and I thought this would be a lot of fun, instead of that idea of, hey, could you explain it to your mum? And say, okay, we're going to flip it on its head, and we're going to bring in some of the smartest people in crypto, yes, all of the mums, to explain it to the rest of us. So should I tell you who we've got? Because I think you only know about Katherine. I'm going to tell you about the others. From pirouettes to protocols, not your average career path, but that is exactly the change that Adi made. Adi, who's going to be talking to us about bridging. We've got a courtroom veteran who used to prosecute federal cases. Now she helps Web3 teams stay out of the dock and keeps two small humans equally law-abiding. That's Jennie. We've got a legal architect who helped us shape the backbone of institutional crypto. She has confessed on this show before that she's failed to teach her kids what a checkbook is, but they know all about Bitcoin. That's Katherine. And we've got a global markets pro with 2 decades in traditional finance. If anyone can handle volatility, it's a mum of 3 who works in crypto. That's Blue. So that's our guest list for today. And shall we meet our first guest, Gareth?
Let's go for it. Let's get this party started.
Now, every blockchain is like a little island. It's kind of self-contained, disconnected. It's kind of weird if you think about your cell phone network. Imagine if you could only call people on the same carrier as you. It wouldn't be so useful. And that's what a lot of blockchain energy goes on today, how to connect the chains so that you can move around different blockchains. And the person who's going to be explaining this concept to us is Adi. Adi, former dancer, now working in blockchain. Tell us who you are, where you work, and what your family looks like.
Hi. So my name is Adi, and as he said, I had a prior career in movement, I would say, also as a dancer, a choreographer, a therapist, and a teacher. My family is on the feminine side, I would say. I have a wife. Her name is also Adi. And we have 2 amazing girls, 6 years old and 1 year old. So I have my hands full of great kids.
Absolutely. So let's move to blockchain. And tell me, Adi, what is a bridge in blockchain?
Okay, so a bridge is a way to move funds from one place to another. This is the most simple way to say it. And as he said before us, if you look at every blockchain as a little island, so a bridge is actually like a real bridge, I would say, a physical bridge.
And different bridges, Adi, work in different ways. And we don't have time to explain all the different models of bridges, but one important model is the burn and mint model of bridge. Can you explain to us what that does?
Okay. So on one blockchain, you have an asset, and you want to move it to another blockchain. So on the origin blockchain where the asset lives, you lock it. This is the
Explain
lock.
What you mean by lock it.
When you lock, you ensure that you can't double spend these funds. You can move them again or spend them elsewhere.
So you like closing them off for use. It's like when you're in Monopoly
Yes.
and you're in jail and you can't go out of the jail, you can't do anything yourself. It's like you're closing up the funds, yeah?
So they're closed, and because on the other side, you're generating the representation of these assets. So they will be usable on the other side.
I think that's very clear. So you're closing up the funds on one end, you're releasing an equivalent amount of funds on the other end of the bridge, and now just explain the part of the burning.
Okay. So in order to transfer the funds back, because you generated the funds in order to use it on one blockchain, you want to move the funds back to the origin blockchain. So you don't want to use them anymore on the other blockchain. So then you burn them, which means they disappear. And only then, and this is an atomic action, we call it. So, and only then the funds will be unlocked on the origin blockchain.
Wow, you've really explained that so clearly, Adi. I think everybody probably has a much clearer concept of what bridging means. So I want to ask you one more question before we finish, which is, why is it that when we're reading the crypto news, we see that so many hacks take place on bridges?
So there are several aspects to it. One of it, it's high volume target. There's a lot of funds. So it's like a honeypot, I would say. Secondly, there are complex infrastructures of a bridge, and the more complexity you have, the more optional vulnerabilities for bugs or exploits you have there. Another aspect is the trust assumptions of the bridge. And this is a scale, so you have some bridges which are trustless and are permissionless, and on the other side of the scale, you have bridges which are centralized, which means more trust on some entity that has more control over it. So the different trust assumptions will also mean that if you need to trust someone, there is trust there. So that entity can be exploited.
And one last thing, give us like a little peek behind the curtain and tell us how, when you're working on bridges together with your colleagues in engineering, what it is that you do to make bridges as secure and sturdy as possible. One little insight.
I think this is part of the culture in Starcore. So the Stark Gate Bridge, which is the bridge we're working on, and we want it to be as permissionless and trustless as possible, and to put the trust, what we say trust, in the smart contracts, in the code itself.
Yep.
So which is can be open code, it can be reviewed, so no one holds power over your funds. You always control your funds.
Adi, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for explaining the concept of bridging to us.
You're welcome.
Let's continue with this very special Mother's Day episode of the Clear Crypto podcast. Now, blockchain is full of idealistic people who are building to advance humanity, and let's be honest, some bad actors too. It's a space full of hope and also some risk. Jennie, you used to prosecute federal cases. Now you help keep people in crypto out of the dock. Let's talk crypto crime. I'm so happy that you're joining us. Before we get to that topic, just tell us who you are, what you do, what does your family setup look like?
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Jennie Levin. I'm happy to be here. I have been in the crypto space for about 3.5 years. I've been working as the Chief Regulatory and Strategy Officer at a company called Figment. It's a staking as a service provider. So basically, it helps power proof-of-stake blockchains. I have recently left Figment, and I am starting a new role at Algorand Foundation on Monday, actually. And I'm going to be their Chief Legal Officer and Chief Operating Officer. Before I started working at a crypto company, as you mentioned, I was a federal prosecutor. I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago, which is where I live, and I prosecuted federal crimes, which included, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. So I have 2 kids, and my family is actually quite unique. I am a single mom, and I have always wanted children. And so I went through 3 years of IVF hell to get my kids. They were my 13th and 14th transfers. And they were born, I call them twins. They're about 15 months in age, but they were born 3 weeks apart through 2 different surrogates. So I'm so fortunate. I fought so hard to have them, and they are the loves of my life. And there is nothing in this world that I will do that will feel more inspiring and accomplished than having my children.
That's wonderfully heartwarming, and I'm sure that Mother's Day is a very special day in your family. That's beautiful. So, from uplifting to depressing, what does a classic crypto scandal look like?
There are many different forms of a classic crypto scandal. And I think what's important to understand is that crypto scandals are not just unique to crypto. We see fraud happen in all different financial areas of life. And so a lot of the same things we're going to see in a traditional financial fraud case, we're also going to see in a crypto fraud case.
I guess the difference and the reason that there's been a lot of publicity for crypto scandals is because it does attract bad actors in the sense that it's less regulated and people have fewer guarantees. So am I right in saying there's nothing integrally that means it's easier for people to conduct crime within the world of crypto, apart from the fact that people have less redress and there is less monitoring? Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right. Let me take the monitoring piece first. You're absolutely right that when you have a public company or even a non-public company, there are more hoops that you have to jump through, more regulatory hurdles that you have to climb over to be able to set up your entity, to run your entity, to report on what's happening with your entity. And that certainly makes a fraudulent scheme much harder because you have to do a lot of covering up of the fraud. Whereas in the crypto world, where you don't have as much regulatory oversight, you're not going to have somebody knocking on your door asking to see your records all the time. And so in that sense, yes. But there are, a lot of these crypto exchanges and crypto entities do have some master, right? So granted, it's not necessarily going to be the SEC, or we're trying to work that out, or the CFTC, but we have checks that are coming into place now. And I think that that's a good thing. From a criminal perspective, the enforcement is the same, right? So if I'm at the U.S. Attorney's Office and I want to bring a case against somebody who's committed a crypto fraud, I will use my money laundering, wire fraud, mail fraud statutes, just like I would in any financial crime case. And I will gather my evidence and use my subpoena power, my search warrant power in the same way that I would in a traditional finance case. And the victim will have the same rights under the victim rights statute to restitution that they would in a traditional finance case. So there are differences, but I think we're making improvements. And I think that people shouldn't walk away feeling that they have no recourse if they are in the unfortunate situation where someone has done something nefarious with their funds.
So my last question for you is, what's the nuanced way of seeing this? You don't want to be one of those people who says it's all terrible. You don't want to be one of those people who trusts everyone. What's your balanced way of seeing the crypto scene today?
I think crypto is the future. Blockchain technology is the future. And so people should participate. It's important to do your research and work with credible companies who have processes in place to catch fraud before it becomes rampant. In actuality, it is a much more secure, fast way to transact. It's just about taking the time to understand what you're doing and how to do it. So, talk to your neighbor who's involved in crypto, call your lawyer and ask them some questions, call your accountant, call people who are, in the space who can give you some guidance and help. Read and learn, but don't let the fear of fraud in crypto deter you from participating in the space, because there is fraud everywhere. And that is not, unfortunately, going to change. And I don't think that there's more fraud in crypto than there are in other areas.
Jennie, I think that's a really balanced and interesting way of seeing things. Thank you for joining us today. Let's be honest, no one gets into crypto because they love reading securities law. But if you're building in this space, you're going to very quickly run into three little letters, SEC. Gareth, how many times in a week do you say those letters, SEC?
You know what? It used to be a lot more than it is now, and that's a fantastic thing to be able to say. But in the last 3 years, the amount of stories that I wrote involving the SEC I mean, if I had 10 sats worth, I would probably have one whole Bitcoin to my name right now. The SEC has been a huge player in the cryptocurrency industry.
And as we know, there is no one better to explain something like that than Katherine. Katherine, you've helped to shape how institutions and regulators approach crypto. Let's start with you telling us who you are, where you work, what does your family look like?
My name is Katherine Kirkpatrick Boss. I'm general counsel of Starkware. I have a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. I love my family. I love my kids. They are my number one.
So tell us in a little bit more detail, what does the SEC actually do day to day? Those guys and gals sitting at their desks in the SEC, what are they doing?
The SEC, actually, when people think in crypto of the SEC, they actually think of SEC enforcement. And there's a lot more to the SEC than that. There's divisions of the SEC that effectively regulate and consult and assist market participants in interpreting the law, in performing routine regulatory examinations. The division of the SEC enforcement, that effectively enforces alleged violations of the securities law is the one that you've seen most active in crypto. And, what they'll do is effectively, if they believe that there is a potential violation of the securities laws, the SEC will conduct an investigation, and then they'll decide whether they want to proceed with an enforcement action, or sometimes they'll resolve the enforcement action outside of a more prolonged process like litigation, like a settlement.
My question would be, how much does the commissioner have a say in what the SEC does? Because the biggest news coming out of the SEC has been the change of guard with Gary Gensler leaving his post. How much does Paul Atkins get to say in what the SEC does, and how much influence does he have over individual investigations? Because this change of guard has been very positive for the cryptocurrency space, and there's an overwhelmingly positive sentiment that things will get better for the industry in the United States. Is that an accurate statement to make? And how much does one person influence the entire institution?
It's a great question because there's actually 5 commissioners, and they're all appointed by the president, and only 3 can be from the same political party. So obviously, during this Trump administration, we will likely have 3 Republicans. We currently only have 4 commissioners, one of whom is the chair, Chair Atkins, who was recently confirmed. I would say, to answer your question, a lot of influence, because like any other organization, it's toned from the top. The chair has priorities. One of those priorities under the Gensler administration was obviously crypto. So we're all hoping that Atkins takes a different tone. There's obviously a myriad of securities violations or securities issues outside of crypto in traditional markets, which make up the vast majority of market activity. So that was one of the big criticisms of the Gensler administration, is not only did they come down hard on crypto, but that they spent too much time and too many resources on crypto, considering it was a very small piece of the overall pie. So we're all hoping Chair Atkins appropriately sets a tone from the top that SEC enforcement should be focused not on registration issues, but on actual frauds and real wrongdoing in the securities markets.
Katherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Our next guest, you've worked across global markets and you're now shaping digital asset strategy. You're the perfect person to help us to understand stablecoins in every and any respect. But first of all, who are you? Where do you work? And what does your family setup look like?
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for having me. So I'm Blue Matula. I'm head of digital assets at T. Rowe Price. We're a large traditional finance firm, asset manager. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, with my 10-year-old twins, my 5-year-old, who is a bit of a wildling, and my husband.
Okay, great. So stablecoins, Gareth, what do you think your readers would really like to know about stablecoins from an expert like Blue?
One of the questions that stands out to me is where stablecoins are really needed. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of conversations with Paolo Arduino from Tether, and he really talks about stablecoins being important in emerging markets. My question to you, Blue, is do you agree with Paolo that emerging economies are the places that benefit the most from this technological innovation?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So I started my crypto journey in Brazil. So my husband's Brazilian, our kids were born in Brazil. And this was sort of before Tether was big. And we used to have to move Bitcoin cross border to pay our mortgage in New York or whatever. And then we'd hedge it. It was like you look back on your history and you're like, oh, I'm the pizza guy, right? Like over and over and over again. But it is really, really difficult not only to have a stable store of value in emerging markets, but also to do emerging markets cross-currency transactions. So if you want to trade cable, right? Dollar sterling, super easy, super liquid, fairly good, pricing. If you want to move Brazilian reais to Colombian pesos, then that's like a 3-step process that takes a lot of days and everybody's taking a piece along the way. And stable coins just facilitate trade. They facilitate cross-border flows. They facilitate so many things we take for granted in developed markets.
Blue, what is a stable coin? A friend seriously said to me that they thought it was something to do with horses. Obviously, it's not. Tell us what stable coins are in really simple terms.
You can take your one stable coin and redeem it for $1. It makes it equivalent to $1 on the internet.
So the dollar value is always stable. It's always $1, which brings us to an obvious question, which is how? How is that achieved?
So it's for reserve-backed stable coins, which is most of them. It's simply that they are holding $1. So you go and buy a stable coin with your dollar. They hold on to the dollar. And then you run around the internet with your stable coin. And then you give it to someone else and they go back and they turn it in and they get the dollar.
Blue, give us a couple of examples of why somebody would use stable coins in normal life, in real life.
So I live in the United States. I had good friends who were getting married in London. I was going back and forth between Brazil and the US, and I needed to buy them a present at John Lewis, which is a department store. I'm a pretty smart cookie, and it took me 2.5 days to try and attempt to get the money into John Lewis to buy the gift. I couldn't use PayPal across borders going through 2 different countries. I couldn't cross PayPal to Venmo or Venmo to Zelle. I couldn't Zelle overseas. I tried all the iterations. And the bottom line was I could send like stablecoin tokens from my wallet to their wallet instantly with almost no fees, basically no fees. And it was a lot faster.
So if somebody's looking to use a stablecoin, what criteria would people be using to assess which stablecoin you use? Obviously, we're not asking you to endorse anything, rather to explain the criteria and what could be different between one stablecoin and another.
The most important difference between types of stablecoins, I would say, is you have a one-to-one fully reserved stablecoin. That means when you give them $1, the stablecoin issuer is holding on to that $1 and you can trade in your token for that $1. And you have algorithmic stablecoins, and that means there's an algorithm that is managing that dollar peg. With an algorithmic stablecoin, it can, under certain circumstances, break from the one-to-one value. And what we've seen in crypto history is that when that happens, it can be a little bit ugly.
Wow, Gareth, I feel we've been educated a lot today. Now, I always almost forget that if our listeners and our viewers want to catch you before the next episode comes out, and who wouldn't, they can actually find you every single day discussing crypto and blockchain. Explain exactly where they can do that.
Yeah, Cointelegraph has a daily X show called Chain Reaction that I host alongside Robert Baggs. We're live every day at 3 o'clock Central European time or 9 a.m. Eastern time if you're in the United States. And we really just try to unpack the biggest news of the last 24 hours. And we have big name guests joining us every day or every other day to help us digest everything. Think about it as a more frequent Clear Crypto podcast, but every day live.
And Gareth, where can people find you on Twitter or on X?
Yep, I'm at Gaza_Jenks on X. That's really where I do most of my social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram as well. Same handles will work.
And if you're lucky, you'll get the odd insight into rugby as well.
Yeah.
Gareth, I wasn't sure when we came up with the idea for today's show, I wasn't sure how it would come together, you know, having 4 people giving insights on this very complex space. But I think that if you're working with mums who are so often explaining complex stuff, the complex world, to new human beings, they're really great at explaining things to the rest of us, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we had some quality takeaways. You know, Katherine's someone who knows the SEC intimately, so to get her insights on that is fantastic. Blue with her take on stablecoins, and really that being the lifeblood of the industry right now, I think is important and eloquently explained. Bridging, you know, the entire cryptocurrency sector is a bunch of siloed capital, and if it wasn't for Addie's explainer of bridging, we wouldn't really be able to grok the idea of how important it is to have interoperability between these chains. And then, of course, Jennie breaking down crypto crime and why that's still a murky part of this industry that hopefully we get rid of. Yeah, I think all the moms today did a fantastic job, probably far better than anyone else. And, you know, a lot of us are parents out there. I've got young twins. And if it wasn't for my wife, I would be at a loss for many, many different things. So I just want to say a very special Mother's Day mention to all the moms out there. Please keep doing what you do.
And do you want to say a personal one to anyone as well, Gareth?
Yeah, to my wife, I love you. Thank you for being a fantastic mother and a voice of reason and the one who keeps us honest at home. And then also just to all the wonderful mothers and women at Cointelegraph as well. We really have a fantastically diverse team, inspiring and intelligent women, and our organization wouldn't be what it is without you. So thank you very much.
And I guess I have to say a happy Mother's Day to my wife, Tammy, and to my mother, Audrey, who promises to be the first to read all of the stuff I write about blockchain. So that's it for the very special Mother's Day edition of the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by Stockware and Cointelegraph. Big thanks to Adi, Jennie, Katherine, and Blue for making the complicated feel so clear. Join us for the next episode of the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by Stockware and Cointelegraph and produced by our friends over at Tonal Media.